Hey, we're here again. Yet another
Hello,
Ask Us
hello.
Anything after a short pause or few weeks pause, I think. Anyways, or 2 weeks, who knows? Anyways, we are here. Ask Us Anything. You know the drill. If you don't know, it's simple. You put your questions, we answer, or we try to answer. We say we have no bloody idea, and we iterate over that, right? What else? Yeah, let's just jump straight into questions, right? We have one. So everybody, folks, start typing your questions. Oh man. Okay, let me read it first. We are running customers-defined workloads on Kubernetes. Cool. Do we need some isolation or guardrails? Yes. Are Kata containers a good solution? I don't use Kata. I kind of every time I tried Kata containers, there was something wrong happening in my head, and I gave up. I will blame me, kind of like it's me, kind of like there's something wrong with me.
No, Kata containers is extremely complex and overdone for most situations. There are certain use cases where Kata containers work well. Other situations where simply the performance also of a lot of weird file system things that happen there make it absolutely like horrible to use from my experience. It is a solution in certain cases. My general recommendation in this area is that it is better to use, if you're in, let's say, public cloud, use something like, Fargate or whatever, use Google, what's their one that spins up a node per pod?
Node per pod, yeah.
Autopilot, right?
Autopilot, yes.
Autopilot, right? Something like that. Or if you have shared nodes and whatever, I think that in most cases, you can use very good runtime protection. So I wouldn't go, if you're running customer things and all of that, I would not go with open source. I would go with enterprise supported, which have all of the accreditations, all of that, be it the Palo Alto Prismas of the world, the Aqua Securities, the whatever. I would use Armo, right? Use real runtime protection in Kubernetes isolation. It takes work, but is going to be better than something like Kata in most cases.
Here's a question I have. In that strange case where actually nothing works, only isolation with Kata containers work for you, why not use a VM?
Well, so that's the other option I was going to say is another potential. I haven't tried it, but I've been hearing good things. Is if you go with vCluster platform, and I know it requires like buying vCluster, it's on the open source. They do have this new thing called vNode, which does basically Kata containers, but like using Linux namespace, wonderful magic stuff that actually like works. From what I've understood. So that is another option. And then they also get their own API server that they're running against, which gives a lot of benefits as well from a security perspective and noisy neighbor side. So I would say vCluster is another option with those isolated nodes. Your other option is to use something like Carpenter and just spin up small nodes and just have node pools per customer that things run on. Like, in the end, if a customer can fill up a single node, my general approach is if you have different customers, just set up a node pool per customer.
Yeah.
That runs on nodes. Have autoscaler come in place if their nodes grow, and use standard node pools for that. Just different node pools, have the sizing accordingly. If you're in AWS or Azure, use Carpenter so that you can get rightly sized nodes and whatnot. But just separate them onto different nodes. Set up network policies blocking between different customer environments, and I think that's going to save you long term a lot of headaches with Kata containers, because there are some weird things like I've dealt with by customers, certain things like that they wanted to do in Kata, and it's just you go down these huge rabbit holes that just never end trying to figure out why overlay FS is causing issues for you, and the reason is Kata. It's just like, I believe Cryo, by the way, is better than Containerd. I will never recommend anyone on planet Earth using Cryo. And the reason is that 99% of the world uses Containerd. So
Yeah,
whether we
exactly.
like it or not, that is the runtime we should use because that is what vendors are testing, except for Red Hat, right? That is what everyone else is testing. That's what everyone is building against. So that's what we should be using.
Okay. Oh, Akiva, same question. $5. Thanks, Ton. Thanks a ton. Really, really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, so when I create Crossplane resources, they're created with a suffix, so to prevent that I'm using external name annotation. But
Right.
there are just like EFS, KMS that we need to use the ID instead. I'm not sure I understand it.
Yeah. Okay. So I do understand this. When you create Crossplane resources as part of a composition, it by default is going to generate like a suffix at the end of like a UUID, kind of like a pod does or a replica set and whatever,
I mean,
so that you don't get the overlapping of resource names unless you explicitly set the name.
I was about to say that, yeah, because I'm to be honest, I really, really, really dislike auto-generated names. That's one of the things that got to my nerves with Knative. Kind of like it's a mess that I cannot untangle easily. I always set the name. I have a pattern, so right kind of, especially now that things are namespaced, it's relatively easy to kind of ensure uniqueness. So I always set the name myself, right? Whatever the name is.
Just hard code the name. Just put the metadata name field in there and don't let it take it from the composition, and you should be fine.
Or you can, if you have a composition, let's say one for a database, another one for application, you can prefix it like DB or suffix DB, so that both of them can have the same claim name. Sorry, there are no claims anymore. The name of the composite resource.
What I always do is I prefix with the name of the composite right now, or claim, depending on if I'm V1 or V2.
Yeah, or composite, exactly.
Plus like a short suffix of what the thing is. So DB, and then you created your DB claim named foo. It would be DB-foo- whatever the name is.
That's what I do.
Of the resource.
Exactly.
And so it's DB foo service, DB foo deployment, DB foo whatever, who cares? And then you can have 50 deployments. And it doesn't matter because they'll never overlap as long as you're creating some mapping between the composite name and the type of composite.
Exactly. There's more from Tilin. There's of name, but those are generated after creation. So how can I populate external name in those cases? So you don't populate the external name, just to be 100% clear.
You just set metadata name.
Exactly. And external name will be the same as metadata name when that's okay. And in some other cases it will not be, but that's because the ID is auto-generated, like VPC, right? You cannot give it a name.
Exactly.
What is your preferred gateway API implementation of choice? Several of them don't quite feel production ready yet. I'll let you go for it, Scott.
So if I'm in the clouds, if I'm in the clouds, I use the clouds implementations. If I'm not, Contour I have liked in the past. I have liked K Gateway a lot. Envoy Gateway I've liked as well. All of them I think are relatively good. I'm really liking K Gateway these days, actually, because of a lot of their AI gateway stuff that they've added in as well. It's from the guy. I think it's Glue. What used to be Glue, and it's donated to the CNCF.
Yeah, that's the K Agent guys, right?
Are they the same guys behind K Agent? I don't know. They have AI Gateway. Is them.
Okay.
As well.
To be honest, I'm getting a bit tired of everything being K something. Kind of like a bit of creativity, folks. I cannot distinguish anymore. Everything is K.
Yeah. But well, it's like is it gateway API or API gateway? Exactly, right? But
come up with the name.
Right. K Gateway, I think, is the best solution that I've seen that is CNCF. Contour is also very good. Yeah. That's if I'm in a cloud, though, a lot of times I like to look at first what the cloud offers me, right? Like GKE, you just get out of the box gateway API, like with their gateway API implementation. Use that. Like, why use something that is open source. If anyways in your solution you have something that is supported, that you can call 1-800-Google and complain that it doesn't work and get support on it, right? Like, is my general approach with that, especially with Gateway API. Because it's a generic API, I'm not concerned that it works here and won't work there. So I have no problem using a different implementation as long as the API is the same.
Exactly. I mean, that like OpenTelemetry approach. I don't care anymore as long as it's the standard of sorts.
As long as it's
okay.
hotel.
More for Tilin Deza related to the Crossplane. Now avoid suffixes to allow deleting a resource and importing again if cluster dies. I'm not sure that suffixes solve that. Right? Kind of. There are two scenarios. Either
solve it.
Exactly. Either the if the name is the same as external name, and when I say external name, I mean auto-generated external name. If they're the same, you can just apply the same things elsewhere and it will work. If external name is auto-generated, sorry, if external name is fetched from auto-generated ID somewhere, again, like VPC, then it doesn't matter whether you put a suffix or not suffix or prefix or whatever, you need to restore a backup.
Exactly.
Simply because Crossplane then does not know that some randomly generated ID of a VPC happens to correspond to that MR. Simply cannot know it.
Exactly. It's an unfortunate reality that you need backups when using Crossplane.
Yeah. So have you tried using Vim motions as part of your ID, maybe even using NeoVim? I haven't used Vim motion. I don't know about you. I tried NeoVim, and I must admit that I'm not nerdy enough to spend. I mean, it feels like I haven't spent much, maybe a day, right? But it feels like, hey, the more time you spend tweaking it, the better it is, and I just don't have patience for that, to be honest.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's not great. It's probably great.
Yeah. I will share here. I still use Vim on a daily basis. I love Vim.
Oh, Vim, yeah. I'm talking about NeoVim.
I refuse to use NeoVim because NeoVim is for engineers that want to spend half of their day, every single day for the rest of their career, tweaking their ID instead of working. And I am not a fan of that. No, NeoVim is not for me. I go back and forth in using Vim motions in like VS Code and Cursor and things like that. I don't use it anymore. I'm not using it. I was a few months ago. I'll probably be back to using them in a few months. But my general approach is I use Vim when I want Vim, and I use Cursor when I want, a GUI IDE. And that's really, I just separate the two. And that's kind of how I work. I do Vim sometimes within the terminal in Cursor. When I'm in the mood and whatever, and I feel like using Vim, I'll use Vim in the terminal within Cursor. That happens on a pretty regular basis, I would say.
Same thing.
The key is no matter what, you never use nano.
No Redux.
That's the number one rule. That's better than nano.
True. Okay. Kubernetes is now decade old. Do you think there will ever be LTS offered? Version upgrade maintenance is still a pain. Now, you might have a different opinion, but I feel that the answer to that question should be no. And let me explain. I don't think that anybody should use Kubernetes kind of directly. I download binary or whatever it is over there from kubernetes.io, and that's what I use. I think that everybody should be using a distribution of Kubernetes. So I see Kubernetes more like kernel, and then you should be using distribution of Linux, and kernel doesn't have LTS. So EKS, GKE, or if you're self-hosted, whatever the options are over there. And then if that's the case, then it should be up to them to offer you at LTS, not up to Kubernetes project.
Yeah, but hold on. You just destroyed yourself, because the Linux kernel has not only LTS, they also have SLTS, which is super long-term support.
Okay, I had no idea.
So
See?
yeah, you
I'm
just shot
uninformed.
yourself in the leg there. Anyways.
But look, who would give that support to begin with?
Well, no, what LTS from a Kubernetes perspective, so I am against LTS for Kubernetes as much as I took place in some conversations that happened upstream in the community around this. I understand the need coming from the, solution integrator world, and living in this world and talking to customers daily. I see the need for it, right? I see customers that have this challenge. I get it. I also get that most of those customers that really have the challenge are running in like air-gapped environments and things like that, where things are very challenging. And not necessarily the vendors that can support them there have the capabilities like AWS do to spend so much money on maintaining non-maintained versions of Kubernetes over time and giving their extra long-term support. Okay, so I understand the challenges here.
So just to clarify, when you speak about those customers, they're running not like RHEL or distribution kind of like, is that kubeadm
no
stuff,
some are running distributions, but they're running distributions from smaller vendors a lot of times, and not necessarily from the big major ones. And even most of the big major ones that aren't AWS can't really afford the amount of engineering power that it takes to give you an LTS beyond much longer than what upstream Kubernetes supports, right? It depends how many Kubernetes engineers they have working specifically on that. But putting that aside, there's a major issue with LTS in the Kubernetes world. And by the way, Canonical do offer an LTS Kubernetes. You can use Canonical Kubernetes, and it's some crazy amount of years. I think it's like 7 years or something like that support that they're giving out a version. It's like, okay, great for deep, dark sites, like awesome. There's a major issue, though, with Kubernetes and when it comes to LTS, and that is that Kubernetes is a pluggable system that has a bunch of add-ons that use a bunch of different capabilities. The second we have an LTS version, 90% of people that I know will run the LTS version, right? If you have LTS, you're running it. If there is an LTS from Kubernetes, everyone's going to want to run on that because they don't want to be upgrading. There are two issues with that. Number one, it is going to hold back all of the add-ons in the Kubernetes space from being able to use the new features of the new versions of Kubernetes, because they have to still support the LTS version, right? As long as there's an LTS version, I have to support that, which means that I can't utilize most of the new features in Kubernetes. That makes it so that the add-ons have a harder time. But the other thing that hurts is core Kubernetes itself. And the reason is because of the graduation process from alpha to beta to GA, the only way for something to move forwards and become GA is that people actually install it and test it. People are not going to be doing that when there is LTS. Instead of something taking today a year to reach GA in a good case, it's going to take 2, 3, 4 years, depending on how long that LTS period is, until there's enough testing of the feature for it to actually reach GA. So you're going to really halt the development of Kubernetes. You're going to hurt every add-on in the Kubernetes space by having LTS. It's just a broken model in such a pluggable core system like Kubernetes is.
That's why I mistakenly brought kernel and Linux distribution. Okay, you corrected me, fine, but kind of basically, it's not really Kubernetes that you're running. It's Kubernetes plus,
right?
Whatever that plus is, and somebody is giving you that plus, or you're picking and choosing. If you're picking and choosing, then I don't understand even the concept of LTS, kind of like, right? Now, if you say, hey, I'm going to use RHEL, and they're going to give me Argo CD and this and that and whatever, and that's my final version of Kubernetes, then they're responsible for it. Kind of like, that's your LTS.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I do not think that Kubernetes should do an LTS. I was for a long time, I was, supportive of the idea until I really thought deeply about what the implications of that would be on the ecosystem. And I think it's just too dire. I think that one of the good things, though, is we're getting better tooling and Kubernetes releases are becoming less breaking between each version as it matures, making it so that the upgrade maintenance is less and less and less of a pain, especially with fleet managers and tools that maintain these things, right? If you're in Azure, you have Azure Fleet, you have things like Spectral Cloud, you have, whatever bunch of tools out there that do fleet management. There's, ranchers of the world, right? Or whatever. They make it easier. Some of them are better, some of them are worse, doesn't matter. Even in the Red Hat world, you have Advanced Cluster Manager, right? That does fleet management of OpenShift clusters, right? So the idea is you want a fleet manager that simplifies those operations for you. We have better tooling, and Kubernetes versions are much less breaking changes, making it easier and easier and easier with every release to upgrade Kubernetes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you said that, what was it, Canonical gives 7 years support, I cannot imagine kind of that Kubernetes from 7 years ago, kind of.
Exactly. What I will say
I
is
would quit the company that would actually tell me that's what we are running, honestly.
Now, what I will say is I do support one thing that Canonical have come out and said publicly. Yeah, there is an LTS version. We will support it for that time period. The second that the LTS version is gone, there is no upgrade, though. No upgrade of LTS.
Oh, yeah.
Create a new cluster. There's no way that you will be able to migrate a cluster 7 years old. And beyond that, I want to point out one other thing. Just because you have an LTS does not mean you do not need to be upgrading on a regular cadence as well, because there will be the patch versions that fix the security vulnerabilities that are going to happen.
Look, I feel that if there is a company that runs 7 years old Kubernetes, that company made the decision never to upgrade. They will run it for next 20 years.
Right, but they can't deal with having critical vulnerabilities, right? So they are going to upgrade the patch versions. Maybe, luckily, likely they will.
Yeah.
Now, hold on. But this is where every version of Kubernetes is tied to a release of Go, to a minor version of Go. What happens when a minor version of Go goes out of support and there's a critical vulnerability found? That means that in the LTS version, they're going to have to bump Go. Well, you're going to upgrade because you need the LTS support and you can't deal with the critical vulnerability. But the chance of that breaking you are higher than moving to the next minor version of Kubernetes, because that was never tested and battle tested in the community. And the minor version of Kubernetes was. So it's actually extremely dangerous, LTS.
At the end of the day, I feel that the whole, I understand the need for LTS. I really do. But that being kind of like we are going to upgrade once, maybe in next 10 years, that defies the reasons for having LTS in the first place. Because in my head, LTS is because this is stable. And stable versions are not versions from 7 years ago. Kind of like simply that's not how it works. And I have serious doubts, to be honest, that anybody can really maintain 7 years old version of Kubernetes. No company.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, next one from Tommy. Monolithic microservices and crossplane compositions. Monolithic microservices. Do you create one bigger composition or a separate one for each microservice? So I think it's a tricky balance. So on one hand, I think that people creating composite resources, not composite resource definitions, composite resources should have something meaningful. So I don't want people to say, okay, so I create a networking composite resource and the storage composite resource, and then I create the application composite resource, that's just silly to me. Kind of, it needs to be somehow meaningful, like application or stateful application or database or whatever that meaningful is, right? From the user perspective. Now, from the designer builder perspective, let's say the one actually designing those compositions, right? There must be a balance, and I think that applies to other things like pipelines, between reusability and not going crazy, right? Yeah, you can say, hey, kind of like, don't repeat yourself. We have one composite resource definition that have gazillion if-else statements and all that's jazz. No, kind of like no, right? Some repetition is okay in my head. Now, when you do have repetition, and you will have between different ones, you can choose to simply kind of repeat. That's not the end of the world. Or you can have your composition instantiate other compositions. So if you have complex networking, you can say this is a networking composition, right? Now, nobody is supposed to use that networking composition directly. But when you create an application composition, that application composition will, among other things, create a composite instance for networking, right? So you can combine them like that. But don't fall that to users. Huh?
Right. That's typically how I like to do it. I like to separate by domain and expertise, right? So you have a networking team. They are in charge of the networking composition and XRD. You have a database team, and they are in charge of the database composition. You have the DevOps team, I hate that term, but whatever, that define what the application XRD is. Now, that application composition is going to utilize database, possibly. It may utilize network. It may utilize compute. It may utilize 10,000 different things that all come together under that, lowercase application, right? The microservice, let's say. Then I do like having the option for developers to define an uppercase A application in which they can basically define their full application. So they can define, I have microservice A, microservice B, microservice C. This depends on this. That depends on this. They can define, right? So think of the topology graph kind of they can build out, which then would create the security groups and the rules between things, and it would create the network policies, and it would instantiate the application, the lowercase a application microservice compositions for each one, the database for the database, the Kafka for the Kafka, whatever it is, it would spit out. I do like that kind of giving that ability. I don't think that should be forced on a developer, though. They want to create at the lowercase a application level, go ahead. You want to create at the uppercase a application level, go ahead. You have two options. Have a nice day.
Exactly. And, I feel that, and I think that this equally applies to other things, not only for Crossplane, that very often we are so focused on technical parts of something that we forget user experience completely. How many times I've seen, like, let me change the subject. Let's say Helm values file that says, I need to change those 5 things, right? That's the part of my domain what is important for my stateless application. And to change those 5 values, I need to go through 5,000 kind of values to figure out what are those 5, because actually somebody decided that technically it's best thing to have it all together and completely mess up user experience.
Right.
I feel that user experience matters. Kind of. I would even, if your applications, if your stateful and stateless applications are sufficiently different, I would have stateless up, stateful up. Behind the scenes, what is happening, that's a separate conversation, right?
Yeah. I will say also, I like what you just talked about is, Bitnami Helm charts 101, right? Like where 5,000 lines. And by the way, out of those 5,000 lines, only 200 of them are actually values. The rest of them are comments and descriptions because there's 7 lines of comments for every value.
without justifying Bitnami, I think it's slightly different when it's third party. Then you have some
third
distribution.
party, I was about to say that. Third party is one thing, not when it comes to not third parties.
Because you don't know who your users are in third party. In your internal something, you know exactly what they are. And if you don't, then you're making a mistake of the very different kind of like that. Talk to them. Like who they are. Find them. Invite them to whiskey or gin tonic. Another one, this is just SPF. Is that spiffy? What is SPF 13?
SPF 13 isn't that SPF 13 is the GitHub. It's the personal GitHub user of the guy who created Go from Google that under SPF 13/Cobra is where Cobra sits. The library.
I know it's something familiar. Now you refresh me. Yeah.
I still have. I'm one of the people that have the SPF 13 Cobra stickers that were put out 1 year at KubeCon. It was in Valencia by who was it? John McBride, who was working on Cobra as well. And he printed like a set of like 100 stickers, and I got one of them. Yeah.
Okay, do you use Reloader for restarting workloads when secrets change, or do you use a different approach?
I use Reloader all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Staccato Reloader is the best tool for this use case when you have it.
Wait, if you're probably more up to date than I am. I know that now there are certain things that don't trigger restarts of pods. Is secrets one of those things?
Well, it never did. If you change the content of a secret, but not mounting a new secret or anything. If you change the content in a secret, that never caused a restart.
Yeah, that never gets there. I know.
Right, but you want it to, because you want the application to reload the content. So that's where
I was referring to. I know that they're bringing, for example, resources requests and limits.
That's in place. That's requests and limits that they changed.
Yeah, only requests and limits. Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that's in-place resource upgrades is 133 and up. It's enabled by default. And yeah, that's for requests and limits only.
Hey, is Talos Linux production ready? What should I take into account if I decide to go down this path? I'm not using it. I'm mostly in cloud, so you know it probably more than me.
Yeah. Production ready, yes. What should you take into account? Suffering. When you need to debug. Peace and happiness when everything works, and utter pain and suffering when things do not. Because there is simply not a terminal. When things go wrong, we go to terminal. When I don't have terminal, everything bad. Right? Like Talos is great when things work. When it doesn't, it's very hard to debug relative to other distributions, things like that. You're going to take into account here things like some things just don't work on Talos because they need specific node permissions. Certain daemon sets, especially in like the security space and things like that, don't work well on Talos because it just doesn't give them the permissions, right? Because it's secure by default. I like to think of Talos to like a traditional Linux distribution, similar to like WASM versus containers. Is it better? Yes. Should you use it? Probably not.
I mean, it also depends. No, let me rephrase it. Is it conceptually better?
Conceptually better, 100%.
Exactly.
Should you use it? No. Probably not.
Okay. So, are you using Argo Workflows? Anyone? Have you tried anything else? Any suggestions? I was using Argo Workflows in the past. I used Tekton in the past. First of all, if you're doing self-managed and it needs to be in Kubernetes, use Tekton rather than Argo Workflows. Now, just if you don't have to self-manage, don't use any of those. Sure. Just go GitHub Actions or GitLab, whatever. Kind of, if there is no strong requirement that it needs to be in your cluster, managed by you, don't go down that path. It's so much suffering for no good reason. I'm all about extending your Kubernetes to that, but my pipelines are GitHub Actions unless there is a very good reason not to.
Yeah. So I, in general, agree, right? If you do go down the Kubernetes CI/CD route, Tecton is the choice to make, not Arca workflows.
Yeah, no doubt.
Now, if you are using GitHub Actions, right, and you can use the public runners, great, have a nice day. If you can't and you need to do self-hosted runners, that's where I know it's not an official project from GitHub, but there is the GitHub Actions Kubernetes runners. What's the project called? Actions Runner Controller, ARC. And the Actions Runner Controller basically runs within Kubernetes and then will spin up pods as the GitHub Actions runners within your cluster. So if the reason that you're thinking of going down the Tecton/Argo workflows approach is because you need it to run within your cluster so that it has access to different services, you get that with ARC, with the GitHub Actions runner controller. And then just run with GitHub Actions and self-hosted runners. That is, I think, the ultimate middle ground. I actually prefer that in many cases over the public runners.
Oh, really?
Because I like it running in my environment. I like having that control. I like that. It's also, you don't pay for self-hosted runners in GitHub. So if you do your sizing correctly and whatnot, it can actually be very cost efficient to do self-hosted runners. And run them in Kubernetes. They're self-hosted. They're self-contained pods for each job, which means that you also get good levels of isolation, good levels of security. You can do salsa level 3 builds, right? So everything is good there. That would be my recommendation, is to go down the ARC approach with GitHub Actions.
Okay. Okay, folks, keep typing your questions. And I just remember that I forgot to pay homage to our sponsors. So CodeFresh. I already repeated it dozens of times, so I don't know what to say. Anyways, it's about Argo CD. It's about GitOps, all different levels, basic, medium, advanced. If you don't know anything, go there. You will learn it well. If you know something, go there as well, because then you will learn advanced parts of it. It's awesome. And they're sponsoring this channel. Thank you, CodeFresh, for sponsoring. Type Victor and you get 50% off, most likely. Okay. Yeah, I haven't used it myself. You know, I often get the question kind of like, hey, can you recommend the book, or can you recommend training or something like that? And my answer is always the same, kind of by the time, because I'm kind of privileged, just to be clear. I'm privileged person that happens to work very close to the edge. So by the time a book is published or a training, I already finished with that something, whatever that something is, right? I tend to be more on docs. So I have no idea. It's probably good. Yeah. It's great. It must be great.
Yeah.
So Shamil probably. Hey, by the way, to PCW, if you're moving to Spain from Slovakia, do it before winter. You will thank me later. You will see a huge difference. So if not Talis, what do you suggest instead? This is you, Scott. Again, I'm not a self-managed person.
Again, from the Linux perspective.
Wait, OpenShift, right?
Exactly. That's always my recommendation. I'm sorry. I couldn't even hold a straight face there. Yeah.
With Argo CD inside.
Exactly. And Jira to manage it all. And we use Nano to edit the files. Yeah. And I could just keep going down this, but you know, it'll turn really ugly quickly. Yeah. So again, from a distribution perspective, I need just a bit more. If you can write in, you know, here, what do you mean about instead of Talos as a Kubernetes distribution, as a Linux distribution? Which element of Talos are you looking at an alternative to? And then I can answer you. Exactly. But like there's, different elements to it. So if you follow up with another question here on just explaining what you mean by exactly the alternative to Talos, if you mean to Talos Linux, standard Linux is the answer. If you mean distribution, it matters if you care only about open source or also commercial offerings. So if you give me a bit more data and where it's running, I can give you some better answers. So I see you wrote for Kubernetes, of course. The question is where that would be running.
Because
on-prem or cloud.
I don't know, but
Bare
cloud.
metal, virtual machines.
I can answer cloud kind of like there must be a very, very good reason to use anything but a managed service in cloud. Very, very good reason. It cannot be just because I like it. Okay, from Luther, I'm looking to switch from Nginx Ingress controller to Gateway API solution controller. What are the key features I should look for when I compare between them? Is support for plugins a factor? It depends again what you need, kind of like basically. If you're switching from Nginx Ingress controller, first of all, well done. I don't think that correct me, Scott. Nginx is dead in the water now, right? Not even maintain it. Oh, you're muted. We cannot hear you, Scott. I don't know. Your voice disappeared.
Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Which one of the 3 Nginx Ingress controllers are you talking about? Ingress Nginx, Nginx Ingress, or F5 Nginx Ingress? If someone tells me which one, then I can answer. But no.
I assume the one in Kubernetes org.
It's not dead. It's stagnating. Let's put it that. My general approach on this is, again, if you're moving from Ingress Nginx, there is a major challenge that I don't believe any gateway API solution actually supports everything you do in Ingress Nginx, and that is because Ingress Nginx exposes over 250 annotations that allow you to do crazy, weird things that that one person ever needed.
Wait. Did you forget about Lua? It's much more than that.
Well, no, as I mentioned, there's 250 annotations. You can then add entire scripts as Lua scripts inside of an annotation and, steal the credentials of, the root user, whatever service account of Nginx Ingress that, has access to secrets all across the cluster. It's an awesome, security posture. So you're always going to have the challenge. My number one thing that I do when I'm looking at a project of migrating from Ingress, doesn't matter what, to Gateway API, is to do basically, I have a script that I run that gets all of the Ingress objects in the cluster, then takes all of the annotations from them, and basically gives me a list of what annotations exist and how many times they exist across my cluster. From that point, that is my list of functionality that I need to be able to find in either the other Ingress controller I want to move to or to Gateway API. If every single one of those has check, great, I can move to the solution. I don't look at it in terms of, is this Gateway API, does it support plugins? Maybe you don't need plugins because you're using 2 annotations that exist in core Gateway API, at which point it doesn't matter. If the features that you need don't exist in the core and you need plugins, well, then, yeah, you're going to want to look at ones that have that feature through plugins.
I have an intermediary step in between that. Kind of like if something does not exist in a product that you're using to begin with, first ask yourself, do I really need this thing? Kind of like, do I really, really need this thing? Or I'm trying to accommodate some unknown desire from God knows when and stuff like that. Kind of, it's to me, it's very dangerous to go down the route of kind of I'm special. I mean, you might be, and that's great. Kind of like Google is special, right? They need custom everything, right? But ask yourself, am I really that special that I need this that almost nobody else does?
Right.
Scott, do you use Codefresh?
Is that a serious question? The answer is absolutely not. And I respect CodeFresh, learning.codefresh.io. Thank you. 50% off with the code Victor on the best training, I'm sure, for one of my least favorite tools in the ecosystem, Argo CD. But CodeFresh make it less painful and more bearable. So thank you, CodeFresh. But no, I am a Flux CD guy. So I have a lot of respect for CodeFresh for turning something that I despise into something that is usable. But no, I am not an Argo CD fan, and therefore I do not use CodeFresh.
I give you that actually Flux is better architecture than Argo CD. I give you that. And I give you that most people don't need UI. They're just fantasizing. I give you all that. But you run into the danger of being in a similar situation as whichever Nginx users are, kind of like. It's slowly dying.
No.
That
contributions are going up in Flux CD.
Oh, really? Okay, I had no idea. So it's kind of, it got a new wind into its sails. Cool.
It got a lot of new wind. Yeah, Controlplane have been pushing it hard. It's still being used in AWS, VMware, all over the place, Azure. It's still integrated into AKS. It has a lot of life to it. It has a lot of community contributions to it. It's going very well. Again, it can always use more contributions, but no, it is a live and healthy project. So absolutely. And there is a great new UI plugin for Headlamp for Flux CD that basically gives you the good parts of the Argo CD UI. So like nice visibility with none of the horrifying, terrible, disgusting decisions that were made in Argo CD UI to allow it to be what I call fake GitOps. Meaning if I can pause synchronization in the UI, make changes to my resources, I now, instead of having source of truth, desired state, actual state, I have somewhere in Git, Argo CD, or the cluster is my desired state. I don't know where ever. Instead of moving to GitOps was meant to be, I know where to look for my desired state. With Argo CD, I have no clue what my desired state is because it may be in the cluster, it may be in Argo, it may be in Git. And I find that horrifying.
My favorite, and this is sarcasm now, my favorite button in Argo CD is create application.
Exactly.
Right? That's my absolute favorite. Let's kind of like go to a GitOps UI and circumvent GitOps altogether.
To kubectl apply. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the, this was long time ago, kind of, when I saw how the setup of Flux itself, and this is from years ago, that was absolutely brilliant. Kind of, there is a chicken and egg problem, but kind of, exactly, Flux Bootstrap, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I love it.
Do companies use separate repos for infra code and Kubernetes code, or do they keep the code in the same repo? I think, and I might be wrong, that this is where Scott and me disagree. So my logic is that there are one-to-one and one-to-many relationships in whatever we do. Like database, right? If you have a shared schema, keep that schema somewhere else because it's shared between multiple applications. If it's a schema for that application, keep it where your application is, right? Because it belongs there. I feel the same for infrastructure or anything less. If you have some, whatever, Crossplane compositions or Terraform this or that, or whatever it is, that creates a database that is used only by that application, I keep it in that repo. Now, just to be clear, that does not mean that I keep everything. It can be a reference to it, right? It could be a dependency. It could be many different things. So not necessarily full code, YAML, HCL, whatever you're using is in app repo. But I need to be able somehow from my when I'm in application repo to deploy an application without going to a different repo.
Again, finally,
doesn't have to.
finally, with the last thing that you added there, which is something that I brought up a while ago, we can finally agree. You can have a make file or a task file or whatever it is that does Helm install from an OCI artifact sitting somewhere else or from a Git repo that is sitting remotely. I do not want the GitOps manifests, the manifests that are synced on through GitOps should never be in your application code repo. You can have something, a script that Git clones that and then Helm install, whatever for development purposes, great. The reason it can never exist in the repo is I don't care if you're using Flux, Fleet, Argo, Cap Controller, whatever it is, when it needs to clone in order to deploy, I do not want it cloning my source code repo. I do not want to deal with when changes to different parts of the repo happen, how I push back and how I make sure that doesn't trigger another CI job and all the weird things you have to do in order to make a application repo work well also for GitOps, and it never does, should not exist there. Period. End of story.
The way I organize it, now I'm going against you, man, is that, okay, so I do have a manifest of my application in the application repo. And I give you the argument kind of not to clone the whole repo. I give you that one. But that does not mean that I don't have a separate repo that is whole production. And it is overwriting certain values from that file and what's not, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a separate repo. I'm just saying that somehow the application definition needs to be when my application is, otherwise I freak out.
Again, and I have no problem, again, having anything you want in the application repo. But when CI generates a new version and it is updating a manifest, whatever, and the manifest that is going to be pulled down to the cluster.
Okay. Now I get it.
Is in another repo.
Okay. So let's put it this way, just to see whether we agree, maybe you understand, right? Kind of when I update a tag for the new release that goes to production, I'm not changing anything in the application repo.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
Now, that does not mean that there isn't Argo CD application with values, blah, 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 and a tag, and pointing to the application repo for the actual files.
No issue with that. I have no issue with anything making developer experience better. But the source of truth for what gets deployed to my actual environments is in a separate repo.
Kind of. We agree. Kind of like not necessarily. I'm saying that not necessarily all the files are in a separate repo, but kind of let's say that we are using Argo CD, right? There must be a repo for production, and that repo has all the applications running in production with their exact values that differ from the default values.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay. Shashi, I think that's how it's pronounced. Just a comment, I use NeoVim daily. It's a common misbelief that you spend a lot of time to troubleshoot it. Actually, after spending 2 weekends to initial config, I'm very rarely running into issues. Brilliant.
Listen, that's great for you. I don't believe, so the belief that I have, which you may consider a misbelief as well, but from the people that I talk to that use NeoVim, it is not that they run into issues and spend a lot of time troubleshooting it. It's that they end up wanting to, they hear about some new plugin, some new configuration, some new this, and after 2 weekends they spend on it, great, everything is fine. Then a month or two later, they spend another 2 weekends going and trying out this new configuration and wanting to try something else. Not because it didn't work, but because they just want to try something new. They want to play with something. They heard of something new. They need to do this. And so it's less the troubleshooting. It's a tool for hacking, NeoVim. So I think it's very stable. That's fine. It's just not where I am at any level. I want my ID to work for me and not for me to work for my ID.
Okay, from Luther, have Argo CD UI in our company saves us a lot for developer support time because they have visibility into their workloads and their health and understand the errors better. Yes, but I agree with that. However, that's where other tools like Backstage would come in, because what will happen there? And maybe that's not your situation. Okay, so I need to go to Argo CD UI to see the resources I probably don't understand even what they are, because you see the tree of 57 different resources, you have no idea what it is. And even if you do, as a developer, Argo CD will not give you all the information you need to do what you just said, right? You will still need to go somewhere else for logs, and somewhere else for metrics, and somewhere else for God knows what. I think that we need to. So there are, of course, kind of like there are two arguments here, kind of how much I like and for which things I like terminal and for which things I like graphical user interface. And I fully understand that not everybody has the same desire or likeness, and that web UI is easier, especially for somebody who is not deep into something. Completely thumbs up on that. It's just that if the goal is to help developers, then put them into place where they will have all the relevant information, because what Argo CD shows you is only a part of that.
Exactly.
Only a part of it.
And everything that you mentioned here about Argo CD UI are the acceptable parts of Argo CD UI, and that's what you can get through Headlamp, for example, in the Flux plugin or anything like that. The horribouts of the horrible elements of Argo CD UI, I'm glad you didn't mention here, but those are the things like being able to edit a YAML manifest, to create an application, to stop reconciliation of an application, anything that is not visibility. Visibility, great. I don't care. If the developers like Argo CD UI, great. Give that to them. They want Backstage. They want something that's better. I think Backstage is better. You can add the Argo CD plugin into there to get that visibility, just like you get in Argo CD, but in Backstage, together with the Grafana plugin, where you'll visualize their dashboards for them, together with the PagerDuty data that's going to show that stuff, together with Jira and GitHub issues and pull requests and all of that in one UI. Very simple. That's the way I would go. But Argo CD UI, if that's enough for them, fine. No issues. But make sure to turn off every of the not read-only functionalities of the UI, because if you don't, that's horrifying.
Now, how does one manage the authorization of infra code if it's also in the same repo as the application code? Now, that's ignoring the discussion whether it should be there or not for a second, right? The fact that it is in one repo or another does not mean that your Argo CD or Flux is actually synchronizing that repo. I'm not saying that. I never, ever let Argo CD synchronize directly from the application repo. I don't do that, right? They synchronize from production repo, or if you do branches, then please don't. But whatever repo it is, right? So having manifest there does not mean that you have or don't have authorization problem, right? If Argo CD is not synchronizing from that repo, then nothing gets there. And if I don't have access to Kubernetes cluster, write access to Kubernetes cluster production, let's say, I cannot do anything, right? Now, if I do have access, then your problem is not whether it's here or there. The moment I get access from my laptop, I have access. I can fantasize and say, Cloud Code, deploy Bitcoin mining to my production cluster, right? Yeah. So that's not necessarily a problem. That's more, I see it more like nitpicking which organization works better.
Yes, I think the other thing, though, by authorization of infracode, if you mean like different teams are in charge of the Kubernetes manifest and the source code or whatever, who should be able to maintain what? Code owners. The way to do that is code owners, right? Well. Very simple. Code owners in GitHub. I think code owners is basically supported by every Git provider these days. But a code owners file
might be called differently. I'm not sure about that part, but,
right. But
there is a variation of it. Yeah. Hi, how can we, what's the time? Okay. Oh, we are almost at the top. Hey, how can we do Canary deployment with Kubernetes within OpenShift? On our company, we do not have hand-on the administration of the cluster. Should we use service mesh? Thanks. So how do you do? I'm not sure about OpenShift because I haven't been using it almost at all. for a while. But if I'm not mistaken, OpenShift comes with, I'm not sure whether it's Argo rollouts or the other one, the
Flagger. My guess is Argo rollouts because they use Argo CD. I just don't know, but yeah.
But they also use Tecton, so
Yeah.
So there is something now. If you don't have administration of the cluster to enable it, then the only option is then you probably don't have access permission to install something either. So you probably need to talk with somebody. And should we use service mesh? Did you say no?
No, I did not say no.
No, sorry. Should we use service mesh? I think that for Canary deployment, service mesh is a good option because with normal services, you cannot really do routing properly. You would need to do some kind of Canary deployments. Hey, if you want 20% to go to the new release, then let there be 1 pod of the new release and 4 pods of the old release, because then the random round robin that goes to all those pods somehow works, unless you do it through some dark magic.
Well, it can also work through certain ingresses, right? So like depending if everything that you're doing Canary has an ingress, so like Contour and whatever, like when you look Knative who do this, right, with percentages and actual percentages of traffic, do it through like Contour or Courier or whatever that supported that. They didn't support like Ingress Nginx because it doesn't support that, right? It doesn't support weighted between different services.
But that's true, but that will do your Canary deployments only for external traffic.
Exactly, right?
Right. Well, so if it's a backend application,
you can create internal ingresses within Kubernetes like Knative does. Knative, in order to remove the dependency on service mesh, deploy a Contour instance, for example, with a cluster IP envoy. And then when you deploy a Knative service, let's say internal facing, it creates an ingress. That ingress is at cluster local though, right? But it doesn't matter. It's accessible. There's no issues within the cluster. You can access it. It's like a service at that point.
True, but I feel that in case of Knative is a slightly different story, because Knative is a project, probably has a strong incentive not to deal with infinite number of service meshes. And they say, you know what, we choose Contour, I think, kind of as our ingress of choice.
Courier, right.
Or Courier, okay, there we go. So kind of limiting choices for a third-party project is a slightly different decision than using service mesh in your organization. You're probably, if you reach Canary deployments.
What I would say is one thing. Service mesh is overkill for a lot of people that just need Canary. However, if you're using OpenShift, you have big clusters. You can install service mesh. Like I'm saying, if you're on there's the big debate between two different types of distributions when it comes to the on-prem world and also cloud. Do you do one big cluster to rule them all, or do you do a bunch of small clusters? And OpenShift mostly goes down the approach of big cluster. And because of that, installing service mesh, not a big deal. If you're going with something like a Tanzu, for example, that its approach is create a bunch of small clusters, installing service mesh, the overhead of service mesh is very high.
That's true.
In a small cluster. And therefore, those are the use cases where I would say maybe you do it through an ingress controller that supports through like Flagger and whatever that do support some ingresses in order to do it. For things that, for large clusters like OpenShift, just install Istio and be done with it. Yeah.
There we go.
Just throw a bit more resources at Red Hat.
The last one. We are over the time. There are some questions we won't be able to answer. So if Helm is too dumb, and it is, and CP, probably Crossplane composition is too complicated, what's the better option? So I'll give you that I think it's similar to what you were saying before, kind of, if you want very simple, relatively simple scenario, relatively small scale, then Crossplane is probably an overkill. Unless you're already very experienced with Crossplane, then kind of like it is. So yes, you might say that cross-plane compositions are too complicated. By the way, they're getting less complicated and more complicated at the same time, depending on the how you look at it. You have, so let me start before I answer that. I strongly believe, I mean, if you have very, very simple scenario, then whatever works is fine. Use Helm, it's fine. But anything but simple scenarios, you want to extend Kubernetes API. I strongly believe that, and that's a hill I'm going to die on. It doesn't have to be Crossplane. It can be CRO. CRO is simpler than Crossplane. Not as feature
No,
rich,
it isn't.
but simpler.
I find it more complex in Crossplane. Just try and figure out the cell formats that they use and whatever. I find it more complex and stupider.
I'm trying to be nice to them. I don't like,
I'm not.
give them something.
I'm trying to be honest. I think that it is more complex and less capable.
Okay, let me put it this way. Without saying what is less complex, more complex. It doesn't have to. I strongly believe Crossplane is the top right now. That's why I work on it. But there are other alternatives. You can use CRO. You can use kubevela. And there are probably a few others.
Yeah.
So look for alternatives. There are alternatives to Crossplane. That without saying what is less complex or more complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's
Yes.
it. We are over the time. Thank you so much.
Helm is
Few
definitely
questions.
too dumb, though. Helm is definitely too dumb.
So because there are two discussions here. One discussion is whether that type of processing should be happening on a client side or inside Kubernetes. And I will argue that by adopting Kubernetes, you are adopting the whole logic of controllers and CRDs and stuff like that. That's part of Kubernetes. I would even question whether you really need Kubernetes and want Kubernetes truly if you don't subscribe to that idea. But let's say that for some people, that's not a good thing, right? You want client-side processing. Cool. Power to you. But the second part, equally bad, is that Go templating is the worst templating or data processing engine or whatever however I should qualify. Text manipulation. Anybody could imagine, right? The goal is to, so basically what we're doing in those cases, you're doing data transformations. That's what YAML is data. HCL is data. JSON, data. What we are doing is transforming either from a programming language to data, right? When I say everything is a programming language in a way, but then we would be talking about something about CDKs or something like that. Oh, I like to write in Go without entering now discussion whether you should, and I want that to transform to data, in this case YAML, and I want to use functions and what's not. That's not Go templating, just to be clear. Go templating is processing text templating. The second option is to say, I want to actually write data in one format and output data in another format. And that would be KCL, which is dead in the water right now, or YTT, or what is Q, or many others. Right? And that makes a lot of sense. I give you data, but not in the final very verbose format, and you transform that data into some other format. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And Helm, I would place a bet that if authors of Helm, with knowing what we know today, started designing Helm today from scratch, they would not choose Go templating. I don't believe.
By the way, that is Helm v4, which is the first alpha was cut for it. If I remember correctly, it is adding support for additional languages.
There we go.
I think that Helm v4 was, and it was released, 2 days ago?
So if you're into client-side processing, then at least check that alpha, whatever it is. Right? Now, what I give Helm credit for is that it is the only standard packaging format. Because there are two things happening there. Data transformation, right? That's when you execute Helm template command, which is executed behind the scenes when you execute Helm install and stuff like that. Transform this into YAML and apply it to the cluster. That's horrible. Now, as a package format, I have nothing strongly against it, to be honest. I think it's fine. I mean, it could be better. Everything could be better. But nobody actually came up with a better packaging format, as far as I know, that is widely used. So that part is fine. So that alpha might be actually really good.
It's worth. I'm very much looking forwards to testing it, and hopefully it is better than what we've had till today. That's what I can say.
Hey, also to give credit, it could be Helm 1. I don't know if you remember that nightmare, but kind of Helm is whichever version is now we're in, 2 or 3, right?
We're now in Helm v3. Yeah.
What was the name of that thingy that had to run in a cluster?
That was also in Helm v2. Tiller.
V2.
Tiller was also in Helm v2.
Tiller, yeah.
Tiller.
Oh man.
Yeah, Tiller was horrifying. Exactly. But yes, I completely agree. Tiller was horrible. But hold on. Can I ask you one question?
Tiller was the right direction.
Yes. Now, one question for you, Victor. Mm-hmm. What the hell is the difference between Tillo and Argo CD? A cluster admin service account running in the cluster that is used to do apply of every resource that I give it. What is the difference? The answer is one has a pretty UI. That is the difference. Argo CD equals Tiller with a CSV for permissions inside of a config map.
I never argued with you against Flux being better. I'm just dubious about the future of Flux. And you just told me that I'm wrong recently. Flux, I'm with you on that one. But Tiller is the idea that actually processing should be happening in a cluster was wrong in a way how it was implemented, but actually it was not so far from Kubevela, Crossplane, what's or not, conceptually.
Yep.
Okay. That's it, folks. I think that we lost Scott. Scott is probably reading about the alpha.
I am.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.